Hey, hello Year 8, this is your lesson 9 of Animal Farm and the penultimate chapter. We've nearly finished. So pop down your title and date. Monday the 27th of April is the day that this video will be uploaded onto ePraise, but pop on whatever date you are doing this on. Okay, format your page again, vocab and key quotes and moments. And before anything else today, like I say, pause the video if you need to get things done. And then you've got your list of vocab. So today we have unanimous, tyranny, dictator, laborious, contempt, accumulate, indignant, lament, and maxim. And all of these on this occasion are actually words that we have looked at previously, but we haven't always made a note. So where we haven't previously made a note, I have provided you with the definition this time. So contempt is hatred. We have looked at contemptible before as being really awful. It's hateful. Might be actually a more accurate way of looking at it. Hateful, extremely awful. And if you feel contempt for somebody, you show hatred for them. You think they're really awful. Okay, so contempt. Accumulate is to gather. And lament is sadness. If you lament something, you feel sadness. We looked earlier in the novella at the word lamentation. It's meant to be feeling sadness. So the other words there, try and move back a bit so you can get them all in at once. The other words there, you have looked at. So what I'd like you to do, make a note of the key word, and then from memory, add in the definition, and then check back through your notes with your green pen to make sure that you've got the definition right. So pause the video here before we start reading to do that little vocab do now task. Okay, and now we are on chapter 9 on page 8081. Boxer's split hoof was a long time in healing. They'd started rebuilding of the windmill the day after the victory celebrations were ended. Boxer refused to even take a day off work and made a point of honour not to let it be seen that he was in pain. In the evenings, he would admit privately to Clover that the hoof troubled him a great deal. Clover treated the hoof with poultices of herbs which she had prepared by chewing them, and both she and Benjamin urged Boxer to work less hard. So like a poultice of herbs, basically it would be a mixture of herbs that are all like mushed up together, and then they'd be put in a cloth, and the cloth would be tied, so you'd have like a little bundle that you could apply almost like an ice pack over the afflicted area to try and aid healing. A horse's lungs do not last forever, she said to him. But Boxer would not listen. He had, he said, only one real ambition left, to see the windmill well underway before he reached the age for retirement. At the beginning, when the laws of Animal Farm were first formulated, the retiring age had been fixed for horses and pigs at 12, for cows at 14, for dogs at 9, for sheep at 7, and for hens and geese at 5. Liberal old age pensions had been agreed upon. As yet no animal had actually retired on pension, but of late the subject had been discussed more and more. Now that the small field beyond the orchard had been set aside for barley, it was rumoured that a corner of the large pasture was to be fenced off and turned into a grazing ground for superannuated animals, which means pensioned. Why do you think no animals yet reach retirement age? There's definitely going to be something about the age of the animals when they first went into revolution, but you'd think somebody would have reached that age. Isn't that odd? Do you think they ever want anybody to actually retire? Because once somebody retires, they are entitled to a pension, which means that the leadership, in this case Napoleon, are paying them for not working. They're just sort of keeping them alive. You have to think about whether or not Napoleon's going to want that to be a reality for any of the animals. For a horse, it was said, the pension would be £5 of corn a day, and in winter £15 of hay, with a carrot or possibly an apple on public holidays. Boxer's 12th birthday was due in the late summer of the following year. Meanwhile, life was hard. The winter was as cold as the last one had been, and food was even shorter. Once again, all the rations were reduced, except those of the pigs and the dogs. Too rigid equality in rations, Squealer exclaimed, would have been contrary to the principles of animalism. In any case, he had no difficulty in improving to the other animals that they were not in reality short of food, whatever the appearances might be. For the time being, certainly, it had been found necessary to make a readjustment of rations. Squealer always spoke of it as a readjustment and never a reduction. Again, look at the use of words, okay, the way the vocabulary is used to control the thoughts of the population. But in comparison with the days of Jones, the improvement was enormous. Reading out all the figures in a shrill, rapid voice. Rapid? Why shrill? It's hard to listen to, okay? People won't realise what has been said. They won't be able to absorb it. He proved to them in detail that they had more oats, more hay, more turnips than they had in Jones's day, and that they worked shorter hours, and that their drinking water was of a better quality, and that they lived longer, and that a larger proportion of their young ones survived infancy, and that they had more straw in their stalls and suffered less from fleas. Are any of those things actually true? Or is it just what they're being convinced of? The animals believed every word of it. Truth to tell, Jones and all he stood for had almost faded out of their memories. They knew that life nowadays was harsh and bare, that they were often hungry and often cold, and that they were usually working when they were not asleep. But doubtless it had been worse in the old days. They were glad to believe so. Besides, in those days, they had been slaves. Now they were free, and that made all the difference, as Squealer did not fail to point out. Again, are they free? So, first bullet point. So the next winter is equally as hard, and once again, all rations were reduced, except for those of the pigs and the dogs. So pause the video there, get that first bullet point down. There's a quote there too, and then we'll move on. There were many more mouths to feed now. In the autumn, the 4 sows had all littered about simultaneously, producing 31 young pigs between them. The young pigs were piebald, and as Napoleon was the only boy on the farm, it was possible to guess at their parentage. Piebald means sort of multicoloured, usually black and white, like patches. So like a dog might be, or dog's a really good example, or a kitten, or a horse you sometimes see. It's about the colouring, the markings on them. And remember that Napoleon is himself a black boar, whereas the other pigs are sort of pink, sort of white. So the fact that these piglets do not have the same colouring as their mother, and the fact that really there is only Napoleon who could be the father, reveals that he is responsible for parenting these multiple other piglets. So here you go. You've got your next bullet point. Napoleon has sired, that means fathered, a further 31 piglets. Okay, so pause the video and get that point down. Worth remembering as well that it's the pigs with the power. He's sort of increasing the number of people in that society who have got power and will have rights, but that means that actually it's going to have an even harsher impact on those other animals who are working to support the pigs, essentially. It was announced that later, when bricks and timber had been purchased, a schoolroom would be built in the farmhouse garden. For the time being, the young pigs were given their instructions by Napoleon himself in the farmhouse kitchen. They took their exercise in the garden and were discouraged from playing with the other young animals. About this time too, It was laid down as a rule that when a pig and any other animal met on the path, the other animal must stand aside, and also that all pigs, of whatever degree, were to be given the privilege of wearing green ribbons in their tails on Sundays. The farm had had a fairly successful year, but was still short of money. There were bricks, sand and lime for the schoolroom to be purchased, and it would also be necessary to begin saving up again for the machinery for the windmill. There were no lamp oil and candles for the house, sugar for Napoleon's own table, he forbade this to the other pigs on the ground that it made them fat, and all the usual replacements such as tools, nails, string, coal, wire, scrap iron and dog biscuits. A stump of hay and part of a potato crop was sold off, and the contract for eggs was increased to 600 a week, so that year the hens barely hatched enough chicks to keep their numbers at the same level. Rations, reduced in December, were reduced again in February, and lanterns in the stalls were forbidden to save oil. But the pigs seemed comfortable enough, and in fact were putting on weight if anything. One afternoon in late February, a warm, rich, appetising scent, such as the animals had never smelt before, wafted itself across the yard from the little brew house, which had been disused in Jones's time, and which stood beyond the kitchen. Someone said it was the smell of cooking barley. The animals sniffed the air hungrily and wondered whether the warm mash was being prepared for their supper. But no warm mash appeared, and on the following Sunday it was announced that from now onwards all barley would be reserved for pigs. The field beyond the orchard had already been sown with barley, and the news soon leaked that every pig was now receiving a ration of a pint of beer daily, with half a gallon for Napoleon himself, which was always served to him in the Crown Derby soup tureen. But if there were hardships to be borne, they were partly offset by the fact that life nowadays had a greater dignity than it had had before. There were more songs, more speeches, and more processions. Napoleon had commanded that once a week there should be something called a spontaneous demonstration, the object of which was to celebrate the struggles and triumphs of Animal Farm. At the appointed time, the animals would leave their work and march around the precincts of the farm in military formation, with the pigs leading, and then the horses, and then the cows, and then the sheep, and then the poultry. So the precincts are the boundaries, so they're going to go all around the outside of the farm. The dogs flanked the procession and were the head of all and at the head of all marched Napoleon's black cockerel. Boxer and Clover always carried between them a green banner with the hoof and the horn and the caption, "Long live Comrade Napoleon." Afterwards, there were recitations of poems composed in Napoleon's honour, and a speech by Squealer giving particulars of the latest increases in the production of foodstuffs, and on occasion a shot was fired from the gun. The sheep were the greatest devotees of the spontaneous demonstrations, and if anyone complained, as a few animals sometimes did when no pigs or dogs were near, that they wasted time and meant a lot of standing in the cold, the sheep were sure to silence them with a tremendous bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. But by and large, the animals enjoyed these celebrations. They found it comforting to be reminded that, after all, they were truly their own masters, and that the work they did was for their own benefit. So that what with the songs, the processions, Squealer's lists of figures, the thunder of the gun, the crowing of the cockerel, and the fluttering of the flag, they were able to forget that their bellies were empty, at least part of the time. In April, Animal Farm was proclaimed a republic, and it became necessary to elect a president. There was only one candidate, Napoleon, who was elected unanimously. On the same day, it was given out that fresh documents had been discovered that revealed further details about Snowball's complicity with Jones. So complicity is unlawful or immoral involvement. It now appeared that Snowball had not, as the animals had previously imagined, merely attempted to lose the Battle of the Cowshed by a means of a stratagem, but had been openly fighting on Jones's side. In fact, it was he who had actually been the leader of the human forces and had charged into battle with the words, "Long live humanity," on his lips. The wounds on Snowball's backs, which a few of the animals still remembered to have seen, had been inflicted by Napoleon's teeth. Okay, couple more bullet points. So we've got now, Boxer is struggling but determined to complete the windmill before his upcoming retirement. And Napoleon is elected president of Animal Farm. He is the only candidate. Okay, so it's not a democratic election. It's not fair. So pause the video if you need to get those notes down before carrying on. In the middle of the summer, Moses the raven suddenly reappeared on the farm after an absence of several years. He was quite unchanged, still did no work, and talked in the same strain as ever about Sugar Candy Mountain. He would perch on a stump, flap his black wings, and talk by the hour to anyone who would listen. "Up there, comrades," he would say solemnly, pointing to the sky with his large beak. "Up there, just on the other side of that dark cloud that you can see. There it lies, Sugar Candy Mountain, that happy country where we poor animals shall rest forever from our labours." He even claimed to have been there on one of his higher flights and to have seen the everlasting fields of clover and the linseed cake and lump sugar growing on the hedges. Many of the animals believed him. Their lives now, they reasoned, were hungry and laborious. Was it not right and just that a better world should exist somewhere else? A thing that was difficult to determine was the attitude of the pigs towards Moses. They all declared contemptuously that the stories about Sugar Candy Mountain were lies, and yet they allowed him to remain on the farm, not working, and with an allowance of a gill of beer a day. Right, okay, so next point. Moses returns after an absence of several years. He does not work, but is allowed rations. Okay, so pause the video if you need to get that down. Something unusual to remark about this is the pig's attitude, isn't it? The pigs aren't very forgiving of anyone. They don't really give anybody anything for nothing, and yet they do seem to be doing that for Moses. And you've got to think, why come back now? Moses has been gone. Moses was Jones's actual ally. What does the return of Moses possibly foreshadow in the final chapter? After his hoof had healed up, Boxer worked harder than ever. Indeed, all the animals worked like slaves that year. Apart from the regular work of the farm and the rebuilding of the windmill, there was the schoolhouse for the young pigs, which was started in March. Sometimes the long hours on insufficient food were hard to bear, but Boxer never faltered. In nothing that he said or did was there any sign that his strength was not what it had been. It was only his appearance that was a little altered. His hide was less shiny than it used to be, and his great haunches seemed to have shrunken. The others said, "Boxer will pick up the spring grass. Boxer will pick up when the spring grass comes on." But the spring grass came, and Boxer grew no fatter. Sometimes on the slope leading to the top of the quarry, when he braced his muscles against the weight of some vast boulder, it seemed that nothing kept him on his feet except from the will to continue. At such times, his lips would seem to form the words, "I will work harder." He had no voice left. Once again, Clover and Benjamin warned him to take care of his health, but Boxer paid no attention. His 12th birthday was approaching. He did not care what happened, so long as a good store of stone was accumulated before he went on pension. Late one evening, in the summer, a sudden rumour ran about the farm that something had happened to Boxer. He'd gone out alone to drag a load of stone down to the windmill, and sure enough the rumour was true. A few minutes later, 2 pigeons came racing in with the news, "Boxer has fallen! He's lying on his side and can't get up!" About half the animals on the farm rushed out to the knoll where the windmill stood. There lay Boxer between the shafts of the cart, his neck stretched out, unable to even raise his head. His eyes were glazed, his sides matted with sweat. A thin stream of blood had trickled out of his mouth. Clover dropped to her knees at his side. "Boxer!" she cried. "How are you?" "It's my lung," said Boxer in a weak voice. "It does not matter. I think you'll be able to finish the windmill without me. There's a pretty good store of stone accumulated. I had only another month to go in any case."
To tell you the truth, I've been looking forward to my retirement. And perhaps as Benjamin is growing old too, they will let him retire at the same time and be a companion to me. We must get help at once, said Clover. Run, somebody, and tell Squealer what's happened. All the other animals immediately raced back to the farmhouse to give Squealer the news. Only Clover remained, and Benjamin, who lay down at Boxer's side and, without speaking, kept the flies off him with his long tail. After about a quarter of an hour, Squealer appeared, full of sympathy and concern. He said that Comrade Napoleon had learned with the deepest distress of this misfortune of one of his most loyal workers on the farm, and was already making arrangements to send Boxer to be treated in hospital at Willingdon. The animals felt a little uneasy at this. Except for Molly and Snowball, no other animal had ever left the farm, and they did not like to think of their sick comrade in the hands of human beings. However, Squealer had easily convinced them that the veterinary surgeon in Willingdon could treat Boxer's case more satisfactorily than could be done on the farm. And about half an hour later, when Boxer had somewhat recovered, he was with difficulty got onto his feet and managed to limp back to his stall, where Clover and Benjamin had prepared a good bed of straw for him. For the next 2 days, Boxer remained in his stall. The pigs had sent out a large bottle of pink medicine, which they had found in the medicine chest in the bathroom, and Clover administered it to Boxer twice a day after meals. In the evenings, she lay in his stall and talked to him, while Benjamin kept the flies off. Boxer professed not to be sorry for what happened. If he made a good recovery, he might expect to live another 3 years, and he looked forward to the peaceful days that he could spend in the corner of the big pasture. It'd be the first time he'd had leisure to study and improve his mind. He intended, he said, to devote the rest of his life to learning the remaining 22 letters of the alphabet. Okay, just want to sort of point out that 12 actually isn't very old for a horse, and 15 is also not very old for a horse. It's only about middle age. Like horses can get to 30. So, got to think, what does this show about these societies that are forcing people to work tirelessly without proper nutrition and care? What does it do to people? Because it seems to imply that Boxer's lifespan is quite significantly reduced. However, Benjamin and Clover could only be with Boxer after working hours, and it was in the middle of the day when the van came to take him away. The animals were all at work, weeding turnip under the supervision of a pig, when they were astonished to see Benjamin come galloping from the direction of the farm buildings, braying at the top of his voice. It was the first time they'd ever seen Benjamin excited. Indeed, it was the first time that anyone had ever seen him gallop. "Quick! Quick!" he shouted. "Come at once! They're taking Boxer away!" Without waiting for orders from the pig, the animals broke off work and raced back to the farm building. Sure enough, in the yard was a large closed van, drawn by 2 horses, with lettering on its side and a sly-looking man in a low-crowned bowler hat sitting at the driver's seat. And Boxer's stall was empty. The animals crowded round the van. "Goodbye, Boxer!" they chorused. "Goodbye!" "Fools! Fools!" shouted Benjamin, prancing round them and stamping on the earth with his small hoofs. "Fools! Do you not see what's written on the side of the van?" That gave the animal pause, and there was a hush. Muriel began to spell out the words, but Benjamin pushed her aside and in the midst of a deadly silence read, "Alfred Simmons, horse slaughterer and glue boiler, Willingdon. Dealer in hides and bone meal, kennels supplied." "Do you not understand what that means?" "They're taking Boxer to the knackers!" A cry of horror burst from all the animals. At this moment, the man on the box whipped up his horses, and the van moved out of the yard to a smart trot. All the animals followed, crying out at the top of their voices. Clover forced her way to the front. The van began to gather speed. Clover tried to stir her stout limbs to a gallop and achieved a canter. "Boxer!" she cried. "Boxer! Boxer! Boxer!" And just at this moment, as though he had heard the uproar outside, Boxer's face, with the white stripe down his nose, appeared at the small window at the back of the van. "Boxer!" cried Clover in a terrible voice. "Boxer, get out! Get out quickly! They're taking you to death!" All the animals took up the cry of, "Get out, Boxer, get out!" But the van was already gathering speed and drawing away from them. It was uncertain whether Boxer had understood what Clover had said, but a moment later his face disappeared from the window and there was the sound of a tremendous drumming of hooves inside the van. He was trying to kick his way out. The time had been when a few kicks from Boxer's hooves would have smashed the van to matchwood, but alas, his strength had left him, and in a few moments the sound of drumming hooves grew fainter and died away. In desperation, the animals began appealing to the two horses which drew the van to stop. "Comrades! Comrades!" they shouted. "Don't take your own brother to his death!" But the stupid brutes, too ignorant to realise what was happening, merely set back their ears and quickened their pace. Boxer's face did not reappear at the window. Too late, somebody thought of racing ahead and shutting the 5-bar gate. But in another moment, the van was through it and rapidly disappearing down the road. Boxer was never seen again. 3 days later, it was announced that he died in hospital in Willingdon, in spite of receiving every attention a horse could have. Squealer came to announce the news to the others. He had, he said, been present during Boxer's last hours. "It was the most affecting sight I have ever seen," said Squealer, lifting his trotter and wiping away a tear. "I was at his bedside at the very last, and at the end, almost too weak to speak, he whispered in my ear that his sole sorrow was to have passed on before the windmill was finished. 'Forward, comrades,' he whispered. 'Forward in the name of rebellion. Long live Animal Farm. Long live Comrade Napoleon. Napoleon is always right.' Those were his very last words, comrades." Here Squealer's demeanour suddenly changed. He fell silent for a moment, and his little eyes darted suspicious glances from side to side before he proceeded. It had come to his knowledge, he said, that a foolish and wicked rumour had been circulated at the time of Boxer's removal. Some of the animals had noticed that the van which took Boxer away was marked "Horse Slaughterer," and had actually jumped to the conclusion that Boxer was being sent to the knackers. "It was almost unbelievable," said Squealer, "that any animal could be so stupid. Surely," he cried indignantly, whisking his tail and skipping from side to side, "surely they knew that their beloved leader, Comrade Napoleon, better than that?" But the explanation was really very simple. The van had previously been the property of the knacker, and had been bought by the veterinary surgeon, who had not yet painted down the old name. That was how the mistake had arisen. The animals were enormously relieved to hear this, and when Squealer went on to give further graphic details of Boxer's deathbed, the admirable care he had received, and the expensive medicines for which Napoleon had paid without a thought as to the cost, their last doubts disappeared, and the sorrow that they felt from their comrade's death was tempered by that thought that at least he died happy. Napoleon himself appeared at the meeting on the following Sunday morning, and pronounced a short oration in Boxer's honour, so he gave a speech for Boxer. It had not been possible, he said, to bring back their lamented comrade's remains for interment on the farm. So, they're lamented, though they're sort of sadly celebrated. If you lament something, you show sadness. So they've not been able to bring back those remains that they feel so sad about for interment, for burial on the farm. But he had ordered a large wreath to be made from laurels in the farmhouse garden and sent down to be placed on Boxer's grave. And in a few days' time, the pigs intended to hold a memorial banquet in Boxer's honour. Napoleon ended his speech with a reminder of Boxer's two favourite maxims: "I will work harder," and "Comrade Napoleon is always right." Maxims, he said, which every animal would do well to adopt as his own. On the day appointed for the banquet, a grocer's van drove up from Willingdon and delivered a large wooden crate at the farmhouse. That night there was the sound of uproarious singing, which was followed by what sounded like a violent quarrel, and ended at about 11 o'clock with a tremendous crash of glass. No one stirred in the farmhouse before noon the following day, and the word went round that, from somewhere or other, the pigs had acquired the money to buy themselves another case of whisky. Okay, where do you think they got that money from? So, final bullet points. Ooh. Steady, right. So Boxer collapses 1 month before his retirement. Squealer announces that Boxer will be taken to the vet to be cured. But when the van arrives to take Boxer, Benjamin announces that the van is from the horse slaughterhouse. However,
Boxer is already in the van when they notice. The animals chase after the van, but they cannot catch up, and the animals are informed that Boxer has died. However, Squealer convinces them that he was given the best care from the vet. Okay, and then that final point that the pigs buy another case of whiskey. So make sure you got those notes down before you move on. Then go and complete your quiz. That is attached on ePraise with the answers, so you can green pen when you've finished. And then there are going to be some links for other stuff to look at if you want to. Okay, bye.